Today I want to tell you guys a story. My story starts from when I was pretty young. Well, actually from when I was born. This is a picture of me in 7th grade. And in case you couldn't tell, I was a gay kid, a gay middle schooler, and I was pretty flamboyant too. I've toned it down for today, so no beads. It was Mardi Gras, I'll say that, but yellow pants were the most subtle ones I could find for today's talk. But my experiences growing up as a young gay kid were really important in forming the person that I am today. Because even though I grew up in a community, in an environment that was incredibly accepting, very liberal, had a family that loved me and supported me no matter what, I still faced bullying and harassment because of my sexuality. I still got called names, I still got bullied in the locker room. And those foundational experiences were really critical to forming the person that I am today. And then in high school, I had a very dear friend of mine named Charlotte. It's a picture of Charlotte. She's beautiful, smart, energetic, fun. She committed suicide. And this was my junior year of high school, and it was devastating. I'd never before been confronted with the loss of anyone. I had my grandparents, I had all my family members, I had all my friends. I had never lost somebody before, and it devastated me, and it devastated my friends. And I knew after she died that suicide was something that I wasn't okay with. I mean, nobody's okay with it, but it wasn't until I was personally touched by Charlotte's death that I was really inspired to try and do something about it, to not just sit back and let other people try to make a difference. And so I did some research, and I discovered that suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for young people in the United States today. And I just thought, this just can't happen. Then a couple months later, I was reading the news, and it was just splashed everywhere that Tyler Clementi, a young gay kid from New Jersey, just like me, he was literally 2 years older than me, he committed suicide as well because of anti-gay bullying. And I just thought, okay, I cannot wait a single minute more. I have to do something. I have to do something right now. I have to try to make a difference because these young people should not be killing themselves. This shouldn't ever happen. So I did some more research, and in my research, I also discovered, actually, that LGBT young people are 4 to 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight peers. 4 to 8 times more likely. And I was like, this just absolutely cannot be happening. So I called up this organization called the Trevor Project, which is the country's it's the leading and the only suicide prevention service for LGBTQ youth. And I was like, look, guys, I'm 17, I'm here, I'm young and energetic, I can lift heavy things. What can I do to help? What can I do to make a difference on this issue? Let me volunteer for you guys. And they said, Cason, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're too young. I was like, well, what do you mean? No, I'm young, I'm energetic, I've got the energy to really do something. And they said, well, Cason, we're a youth-facing organization, and we do really, really critical, important life-saving work. And because of the liability, you have to be 18. I thought, okay, well, actually, that makes sense. I understand. But what a bummer. I mean, I really wanted to help. But I was so impassioned by this issue that I knew that I couldn't just take that answer, take that no, and just be okay with it. I needed to find a creative way where I could still give back. And so I decided to start something called the Rainbow Summits Project. The Rainbow Summits Project was my initiative that combined one of my totally tangential passions, mountain climbing, with my desire to give back to suicide prevention services for LGBTQ youth in the United States. So my idea was that I could climb the 7 summits, which is the highest mountain on each continent. It's basically the mountaineering equivalent of like the Grand Slam tennis tournaments or the Super Bowl. It's kind of a big deal. Maybe not the biggest deal. There are other things that are potentially more difficult and cooler, but it's one of them. It's up there. And I thought, well, what if I were able to accomplish this big feat and use that as a platform to raise money and awareness for this cause that I'm so passionate about. And in so doing, combine these 2 passions and create a unique contribution to the world, hopefully make the world a better place. So I thought, well, I'd actually already knocked off one of the 7, so that was convenient. So I already done 1/7 of it. And I went down, and it was really important to me that I proved to myself and to my parents that I could actually climb these 7 very high mountains. So I went down to Argentina, and I climbed the highest mountain in South America, Aconcagua. And I was like, well, that was actually really fun, and it wasn't even too difficult. This is definitely something that I want to pursue. So I started pretty much from that moment on, this was 2 years ago, I started climbing these mountains. And in addition to climbing the mountains, I was meeting with young people and talking to them about suicide prevention, about bullying, about cyberbullying, about all of the issues that face young people, especially young LGBT people in the United States and around the world today. And so throughout this project, I was talking, in addition to climbing, I was talking to these young people. And so, I had already climbed 2 of the 7 summits at this point, and then I went to North America's highest peak, Denali, Mount McKinley in Alaska, and I gave it a go. And so Denali is a very difficult mountain, arguably the hardest of the 7 summits. You're carrying up to 150 pounds on your back and in the sled that you're dragging behind you for up to a month. So I had spent 27 days on the mountain. This is June 2012. And we got up to high camp, 17,200 feet, and we got stuck there in a storm. And so I've got a video to show you guys what it was like. So it was pretty windy. So this, yeah. The video speaks for itself, but suffice to say that it was very, very windy. And the conditions were not good enough to go up for the summit. Because really the most important thing to consider when you're climbing is safety. So we knew that there was no way we could go up to the summit safely, so we decided to turn back and after a month on the mountain, go back down to base camp. And I got off the mountain and I was crushed. I was crushed to have attempted this mountain, to have put so much time and energy and effort into trying to get to the top and not making it. And I got off the mountain and I called my parents. First thing I did, I was like so upset. I was basically in tears, because I hadn't reached my goal. I hadn't been successful. And this was a really important point in this project for me. This was a really important personal reckoning because in reflecting on why I was upset and what had happened, I came to the realization that actually, instead of giving up now, instead of saying, oh, I haven't reached my goal, I decided to reframe the way I looked at what I was doing. Instead of making it getting to the top of every mountain, I decided to look at it as doing my best. I decided to think, well, okay, I didn't make it to the summit of Denali, but I put everything I could into getting there. And I actually got, almost all the way to the top. And so that was a really important personal lesson that I learned, that I had to reframe success so that it wasn't how high you got. It was as far as you could get, giving it your all. So I decided that rather than give up on the project, I would keep going. Maybe I would get a chance to go back to Denali, but if not, so be it. I would just do my best to try my hardest on all of the other mountains in the 7 summits. So a couple months later, I went to another very challenging mountain, another one that some people consider to be the hardest of the 7 summits, called Carstens Pyramid. It's the Australasia-Oceania peak, and it's in Indonesia, in a province called Western Papua. And I won't go into too much detail, but you might be interested to know that this is a part of the world where the local tribes first became acquainted with Westerners like in the 70s. And anthropologists go and study these cultures because they're so different from anything that we've seen before. Some of them are even still today, in 2014, cannibals. So it was definitely an exciting time. And to get to the mountain, you actually had to trek through jungle for a week. And I had done a lot of trekking before. That's how I got into climbing. And I had never faced anything like this. And it was crazy. Going up on slippery rock in wellies is not something that I had ever done before, and hopefully something I'll never do again, because it was really scary. But eventually we got to the mountain, and Carstens Pyramid is basically a vertical rock face. And the climb from base camp to the summit and back down is about 10 hours. And you have to do this in the middle of the night because consistently every day the mountain gets lightning storms on the summit, so you don't want to be up on that big granite ridge in the afternoon. But I went up with my team and we made it to the top of the ridge, saw the sunlight rise, and then this is a video actually of me traversing the ridge, and you can actually see in this video base camp. You probably wouldn't recognize it, but that's literally straight down about 4,500 feet. And it's pretty scary. And so this is where I faced my second big personal challenge, which was my fear of heights. So I know it might surprise you to hear that I'm afraid of heights, but it's really true. And the great thing about mountain climbing is that most of the time, well, actually exactly half of the time, you're not really looking down. You're climbing up and you're looking in front of you at the mountain. And it actually doesn't really feel like you're very high. But then for the second half, when you're going down, or when you're traversing a ridge like this one on Carstens, you have to deal with this fear. I had to deal with this fear. And so the way that the strategy that I developed to deal with my fear of heights was breaking down the challenges I was facing, this fear of heights, into smaller ones. So instead of just letting this fear consume me, which would have been totally unproductive and very unsafe, I decided to just focus on one step at a time. And what I did literally was focus on one step at a time. I looked at my feet, and I put one foot in front of the other and looked exactly at where I was placing my feet. And that's how I made it down the mountain safely. But I'm still a little bit afraid of heights, so it didn't completely eradicate my fear. But I've developed a strategy, a personal strategy for dealing with that, and that was a really important lesson. And then finally, so I got to the top, and it was awesome. Finally, I want to share with you a couple photos from my experience on Mount Everest. So I climbed Mount Everest as my penultimate climb. It was the seventh mountain I climbed, but again, I hadn't summited Denali, so it was the sixth or the seventh I was trying to summit. And I climbed it last April and May, and it's a 2-month-long expedition. Everest is unlike other climbs in that it's so high that you actually have to go halfway up and then back to base camp, 3/4 of the way up, then back to base camp, and then up for the summit to let your body adjust the altitude. You can't train for altitude. It's basically you've either genetically got it or you don't. But what you do is you just spend a long time letting your body naturally adjust to the high altitude. So we got to base camp. You can see Everest. I actually took this picture. You can see Everest. It's the black rock triangle behind the mountain in the foreground. And so we start off. I had a great team. We start off. You climb in the middle of the night because that's when the ice is most stable. And it's this lower part, the Kumbo Icefall, is the most dangerous part of the climb. And I'm human. I'm not superhuman. I make mistakes too. And this was a big mistake. I didn't take good enough care of my feet. And so actually on both of my pinky toes, I had humongous blisters. And having not really gotten blisters before, because I had previously taken good care of my feet, I decided that the best strategy for dealing with these massive blisters was to pop them. It's not the right approach, and so all the skin came off of my toes. But luckily, I recovered and was able to make it up. This is on our second rotation, up the Lhotse face, which is probably the steepest part of the climb. And then finally make it to our summit day bid. And this is a picture of my team climbing to the right of me on summit day. And it was really challenging, but eventually I made it up to the summit. And to my knowledge, to anyone I've talked to knowledge, it was the first time that someone had brought the rainbow flag, the LGBT pride flag, to the summit of Mount Everest. And that was a really important personal journey for me. But what made it even more meaningful was that I brought with me not only the LGBT flag, but also prayer flags, traditional Tibetan prayer flags, dedicated to the memory of young LGBT people who had committed suicide. And so I took those flags out and I laid them on the pile of prayer flags. You can see it behind me in the picture, that people had left there for the year, and the prayers flew to all the corners of the earth is the myth. And so, I made it up to the summit of Everest, and that was great. And then I made it back down safely, and then I actually had the opportunity to go back to Denali, to go back to Alaska, and give it a second go. And I was able to summit on the second time, which was really lucky. And so, I got up to the top, and I got back down, and it hadn't last July when I finished the 7 summits. It hadn't really sunk in that I'd done it, and even now it hasn't really sunk in. But the climbing aspect of it, the fact that I've accomplished the 7 summits and became the 5th youngest person and first openly LGBT person to climb the mountains, that was actually the less important part for me. Because the overwhelming sense I got when I got down from Denali, having completed the 7 summits, was appreciation, gratitude, and pride. Not necessarily pride in the fact that I'd done the 7 summits, but in the awareness and money I'd raised for this nonprofit, this suicide prevention nonprofit. Because throughout this year and a half, I had spoken to over 1,000 young people and raised $135,000 for this nonprofit. And that was what really was important to me, because I came into this journey not trying to be the first openly gay person to climb the 7 summits, trying to make a difference on suicide prevention. That was always my goal. And so, having completed this project, I came to a really important realization. Two really important realizations, actually. The first one was that climbing was actually a lot like growing up as an LGBT youth. The challenges you face, the way you have to deal with them, a lot of those things are very similar to the experiences that young LGBT people have when they grow up. And so that was really interesting. And the second was that I was able to combine my unique talent and passion for mountaineering with this cause that I was really interested in supporting. And that was able to yield an incredible result. Money raised, awareness raised, and personal satisfaction. And so my idea worth spreading with you all today is that each and every one of us has a unique set of talents and interests. For me, it's climbing, it's the Arab world, it's all this weird mix of talents and interests, and each of us has a unique mix. And if we're able to channel that and relate it to a cause or multiple causes that we're passionate about, then we can yield amazing, amazing results. And sometimes the path that other people have taken or other people have set out doesn't work. And even if you try to follow that path, you won't really get the results that some people might expect. You won't have the same level of results as if you're able to combine your unique talents and interests and come up with a unique contribution. And so, when I think about making my path, making your path, making the path, I would urge all of you all to look deep into yourself and to think, well, I'm really good at cooking and I'm really passionate about South America. What if I could start up a cafe here at school and send the money down to a nonprofit in South America? Things like that are, think outside the box and really challenge yourself to not just follow the path that other people have set out for you, but instead to try and think of ways that you can set your own path. So the final thing I want to share with you guys is, when I was thinking about doing this journey, my mentor, my climbing mentor, Lydia Brady, incredible woman, incredible climber, she asked me, Cason, this is before I thought about any of this, she said, Cason, when are you climbing Everest? And I was like, I can't climb Everest. What are you talking about? She's like, yes, you can. So the question I want to ask you guys today is, what's your Everest and when are you climbing it? Thank you.